So it's like no driving gloves, everybody. We've been sitting here for a few minutes, and Will and Sean have gotten way on topic for a change, and we just kind of jumped right into the recording. So let's just go, and we're going to see where we go. Derek's whining that we're going to change the topic, but maybe we'll get back to what our real topic was. So typical no driving gloves. In your court, Will.
So, Sean, being that the business you're in
And
of
who's ever
building,
eating ice, stop it.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's Sean.
that would be Sean.
I wasn't eating it.
Called out.
So, Sean, being the business that you're in of building race simulators, which I think is pretty cool, actually. With NASCAR going to this simulated racing thing, I can imagine that it's opened a lot of eyes to that type of racing, online racing, gaming in general. I'm not a big gamer. I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but I see it. I do follow a couple of NASCAR drivers on social media, and it's pretty awesome just sitting there watching. It's almost like their in-car camera, but it's like one of their kids recording them. And they're sitting there, racing and talking to their kids and their wife while they're, drinking whatever they're drinking, and it's pretty cool. So I don't keep up with enough to see how well it's going or how good it's doing for your business of opening people's eyes and saying, "Oh, let me get me a race simulator," blah 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 blah, whatever. So I'll just, with those 4 or 5 questions, let you go from there.
It's the current situation is shedding a lot of light on esports in general. Any gaming that can be turned into a competitive outlet basically is esports, and there are all different kinds of genres of esports. I mean, you've got your baseball, basketball, football, Madden, FIFA Soccer, NHL, and then you've got first person shooters, Call of Duty and Fortnite and the like. And there's e-motorsport that's it's always been there. Over the last 5 years or so, we've seen a pretty big uptick, I guess, in the level of, I guess you'd say, manufacturer, sponsor, and professional level involvement inside e-motorsport, the electronic side of racing. I've been involved in this for like 20 years. And it's, seeing it grow from where I've seen it grow to where it is now, and trying to find something, a positive spin for what we're going through right now. I think NASCAR they're jumping in at you could look at it two ways. You could look at it as them capitalizing on a horrible situation, which they are. But you could also look at it as it's a horrible situation and people want to be entertained still. And most of the NASCAR drivers, and there are a bunch of other series that are jumping on board as well. Formula One is doing their own esports thing, and none of this is new either. I mean, NASCAR fully sanctioned the iRacing NASCAR at the highest level for like the last 8 or 9 years. There has been a NASCAR champion crowned in iRacing for damn near a decade, maybe a decade. And real money has been paid out. I mean, you can literally, as a sim racer, make 6 figures easily. If you're really good. I mean, I say easily, but there are opportunities to go out and become the Gran Turismo world champion, which pays out well, or the Forza world champion, which pays out well, or there's NASCAR Heat on Xbox and PlayStation. That's the official video game of NASCAR, and the official simulation of NASCAR is iRacing. NASCAR has championships running concurrently in both of those platforms, and they pay well. And what we've really seen since the self-isolation, or the just everybody staying at home and tracks being shut down, and just all of this sort of coming to a head, NBC Sports has televised racing online. Fox Sports has televised eMotorsport online. I think 900,000 people is what they say watched the first NASCAR eMotorsport race week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. IndyCar is doing their online thing now. 600, 700,000 people watch that. It's great. It's great to see what I've been involved with for damn near 3 decades grow the way that it's growing right now. It's very exciting from that standpoint. I hate the fact that it's growing as a result of what we're all going through right now, but it's kind of one of those things where it's fun, man, and it is everything. It's everything that the driver would go through inside the car at the track, other than G-loading, 130-degree in-car temperatures. And if you really want to simulate that, just put a heater, put a blowtorch next to your simulator chassis if you want to, and the drivers can't get hurt. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, as far as the racecraft and the car setup and just basically everything else that goes along with a race weekend, these software titles have grown to the point where if you don't know proper chassis dynamics and shock setup techniques and how to get a car to turn that isn't turning, or how to get a car to stop turning that's crazy loose, and you're driving the car down in the corner and it's trying to come around on you mid corner off, or it's not turning on turn in down to the mid. All of the same terminology and technology and skill set from a crew chief standpoint and a driver standpoint to basically go back to that crew chief and say, this is what the car's doing right and this is what the car's doing wrong. It's all there in sim.
So I've got 2 more questions. One is, what keeps them from cheating, adjusting their settings as they're racing versus when they pit, like real NASCAR? And then another question is, so is it just NASCAR drivers that are doing this on Sunday afternoons, or have they invited, like the world, e-racing NASCAR champion to join and race?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix. And we've, like, the NASCAR races are typically they'll be Gander Mountain, Xfinity, and Cup drivers in that event. And the reason why they're doing that is a lot of the Gander guys, the truck guys, and the Xfinity guys, they're younger, and they have sort of come up with sim steering wheels in their hands, and they kind of get it intrinsically. Some of the Cup guys just haven't adapted to the sim stuff. And whether that's right or wrong, I will never go at a guy that spends 250 plus days in the real world on a racetrack and say, you have to have simulation. But I will say that it would augment their time away from the track, and it does pay dividends when you get back in the real car. So why would you not want to do it, other than, if you're spending 340 days a year on track, then, you're probably okay. but simulation is it's everything that you want it to be. If you just want it to be fun, it's a hell of a good time. If you want to take it seriously and get down to literally analyzing all of the telemetry that's pulled off a real world race car with regard to braking forces, when you're braking, how much you're braking, when you're letting off the pedal, when you're tipping in the throttle, how you're tipping in the throttle, corner entry speeds, mid-corner speeds, exit speeds, wheel angle, everything that can be analyzed from a driver development standpoint and a chassis development standpoint in the real world can be analyzed in the sim. And it's, like I said, it's literally everything from casual gamers sitting there playing on their PlayStation or Xbox, all the way up to, $50,000, $100,000 plus simulators with full motion and crazy haptic sound and virtual reality. And it's how real do you want it to be? I gave this analogy. I had a friend interviewing me yesterday, actually. I gave this analogy. Simulation is literally exactly like horsepower, in that horsepower costs money. How fast you want to go determines how much you're going to spend. Simulation can be as real as you want it to be. It just costs X amount of dollars to get here. You know what I'm saying? There's a correlation between the real world and simulation in almost every way, other than the fact that when you're in a simulator, chances are you're not going to hit a wall and get hurt.
Now, my question, and what's kind of confusing me on this is, like, I read a post today that IRL is going to race Barber Motorsports Park this Saturday on NBC at like 2:30 Eastern. Plug. And over 24 drivers are going to be there. Now, like you said, it's going to be IRL drivers. It's going to be all a mix of open wheel.
Yeah, there'll be road to Indy guys and IRL guys, definitely.
Is everybody in the same simulator? Is everybody playing with the same equipment at home?
No.
So, I don't know any of the drivers in IndyCar right now, but I'm just going to say old IndyCar driver names. But so you got Rick Mears playing on his PlayStation, and then you got Danny Sullivan, who's, in a Nemesis simulator, and you've got X number, whatever guy, Fittipaldi in a full motion 3D simulator. Do you think that makes a difference when it really comes down to it? Or is the fact I'm running on a PlayStation giving me an advantage over somebody who's actually physically in a 3D motion simulator and experiencing the G-loads in that?
No, because, consoles, there's only a couple ways you can integrate a console to a motion platform to begin with. And cross-platform play, it started to happen a little bit with some games. It hasn't really bled down to motorsport other than the Forza series, which you can play on Xbox and PC at the same time against each other. But iRacing is PC only, so everybody is at least on a PC. Where you get the divergence basically is, this guy could be running on a $500 wheel and pedal set that's basically entry level, and you could have another guy that's literally using a $1,600 wheelbase that's a servo motor, direct drive with a $2,000 steering wheel that's almost an exact replica of the steering wheel that he has in his real car. It could be a replica or could actually be the steering wheel that they have in their real car with all of the buttons working exactly the same. There is disparity in cost of entry. And they haven't, like, if it's NASCAR is basically a spec series. IndyCar is basically a spec series. There's a couple manufacturers involved, but it's the same chassis. It's different motors, same chassis. They haven't spec'd a simulator that they're saying you guys are going to use this chassis and this wheel and these pedals and this PC and everybody's running on an even playing field. Having said that, the guy that's in a $250,000 simulator doesn't necessarily have an unbeatable advantage against the guy that's sitting in a wooden chassis with a $400 wheel. I have literally seen over the years that some of the fastest sim racers on the planet are still running what most of us would consider to be absolutely archaic setups. And fast is fast. And it will find a way to beat, that level of talent finds a way to rise up no matter what you're driving with. And I don't think there's really, as a matter of fact, I know I've been involved in this long enough to know a $2,000 steering wheel is definitely better than a $400 steering wheel as long as you're comparing the right equipment. A $1,500 set of pedals with an actual hydraulic brake is infinitely better than a $90 set of pedals that doesn't have even a load cell on the brake pedal, and all the brake is just, however far you push the pedal and you get to the end, and that's where you get lockup. You don't get the brake feel. The more expensive stuff is typically more immersion. It doesn't necessarily mean you can go faster with it. It means that it's going to feel more like the real vehicle. But you can always game that, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to put this in easy to understand terms. So no one has an advantage. You just sit in the car and drive, man, and get as much out of it as you possibly can.
So the situation we're in now, as horrible as it is, this is probably, this is a bad analogy, but like I said, as horrible as the situation is, if you look for some good in it and you're a sim person, this is probably the best thing that could happen to simulator sports. Now, I don't know if they're playing baseball and you've got the Cubs and the Cardinals playing on, the two teams playing each other virtually and online and people watching that.
I know NBA is. NBA is actually firing up NBA 2K and Madden with Madden football. They're firing up some football right now for esports. It's being done.
So it is probably the best thing. I know you and we played a business proposition last year with an esport arena and an esport center. And I've always said, I don't understand video games. I had a bad experience almost 40 years ago, 37 years ago, and I don't play video games. So I don't understand any of this, but all of a sudden it's there. And a couple of weeks ago when this was first tossed around in the racing community, because that's the only people I follow online, everybody's going, oh, it's simulators. It's, we're not going to pay attention. And every week, especially in the NASCAR crowd, it seems, they're going, wait a second, it's pretty real. If you didn't tell me if you didn't tell me it was a sim, you couldn't tell the difference. And I've always complained about that on Facebook with you and Vincent and Matt and a bunch of these other guys that I'm friends with or used to be friends with or things like that, when you'd talk about, well, I went racing at VIR this weekend. I go, wait a second, I saw you Saturday afternoon at lunch. How the heck did you race at VIR at 3:00 on Saturday? And then and there's footage and there's cars, and I go, wait a second, this has got to be sim. And it just kind of.
So wait, John, I gotta ask, was the bad experience with a video game, because you're the old guy on the show? I mean, did you never win at Pong? Is that?
No, it had to do with birthday party and spending all of my money and finding myself at the end of the birthday party, because I still wanted to play video games, going around constantly digging in the little change things, hoping somebody left a quarter so I could play more. And after I realized what I was doing there, I haven't played video games. Drove Amanda and Mary Ryan crazy that I never played video games, wouldn't even play Mario Kart with them. And it drives Zara and her children, Brad and Zane, crazy because I just don't grasp video games. And working with Sean last year, I started to get some of it, but I still don't understand how the highest paid people on YouTube are people that play video games and people watch them.
Millions of followers that watch them every day, man. It is a thing. Whether you get it or not, it doesn't really matter. There's plenty of things out there that are things that I don't understand, but someone loves them, so let them love it.
And I'm looking at this from the sanctioning body standpoint, I guess. When, like I said, Sean and I really worked a business proposal last year, and it still may kind of come to fruition. But when I started to do the math and really just scraping the surface, just opening up the can of frosting and just taking a little dip with your finger in the amount of money that is. And it's this huge pool. And, I don't know.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah. I don't know if the IndyCar series or NASCAR or Formula One, if part of this is to save some of the sponsorship dollars. Originally they talked about running these races, running them physically at the tracks with no spectators. And I think they woke up really quick going, the tracks can't afford to do that. If they don't have spectators, They can't afford to run the race. So I think as much as they used, this team member and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, as much as this team member got coronavirus and this team member did, and we don't want to risk traveling, I think when it came down to it, it really came down to the dollars, that there was no facility they could go to and operate at for their money. And
you can put together a broadcast in simulation that literally mimics exactly what they do at MRN and on Fox. And I mean, it's the overlays, it's the commentators, it's bringing the drivers and crew chiefs and sponsors up into the booth for interviews. It's everything that the real world broadcast is.
Well, the NBC broadcast this weekend is their 3 main IndyCar announcers. So they've got the real announcers. And when we get into this virtual, when you watch, I know Formula One did it, or does it. When you watch a Formula One race, a lot of the advertising you see are on the walls or on the track, or any of the background advertising is digitally projected there for the televised market that it's in. And so you're already, even if you're watching a real Formula One track and you're watching whomever go around the track, and all the stuff on the side is already simulated. It's a weird, just a weird perspective when you get into it. And now all of a sudden we're here and now, and,
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. And I mean, this was going to grow to this level over the next 3 to 5 years anyway. And, being on the inside of motorsport the way that I've been and being involved in simulation for as long as I have, I've seen it grow, and I know I have a very good idea where it's going. What's happening right now has accelerated it to a certain extent. When we come out of this, though, and things go back to whatever the new normal is that we're going to have, there will be a drop in what we're seeing on the sim side of motorsport. We've got, what is it? IndyCar, NASCAR, World of Outlaws, IMSA, Formula One. I think V8 Supercars is doing something over in Australia. There are all of these giant international series that have jumped on the sim bandwagon. When they go back to the real tracks, I have no delusions that Fox is going to want to have a weekly sim show. But they probably will want to have some highlights when they go back to the real world. And in the off season, we might see something. It's accelerated it. I don't think it hasn't taken the place of it. It's just accelerated.
Do you think you're going to start seeing, because they gave it to me free, and ironically it's sim, I went ahead and signed up for CBS All Access this week so I could catch up on my Star Trek and Twilight Zone and stuff. Do you see it being a sport that CBS All Access would put on, or NBC's whatever their pay platform, or you're seeing it broadcast live on Hulu if Hulu gets to that?
Totally.
It's not going to. I don't see it becoming a big 3 network or big 4 network weekly Saturday afternoon. It's not going to displace racing, but I have a feeling they're not going to let this momentum die. And I have a feeling, as much as I learned the financial side of video gaming, I think a lot of these companies and sponsors are going to learn the financial side of virtual gaming. And this is going to be a huge impact. And I think the sponsor dollars are probably going to go more virtually. It's already
sponsor dollars will definitely trickle over.
Yeah,
they'll definitely trickle over. And it's because, you don't have to dig deep to find stats on what video games have done over the last decade, revenue-wise, compared to Hollywood. Video games took over Hollywood several years ago as far as overall revenue generated per industry. For entertainment industry, video games eclipse Hollywood by millions and millions.
Well, you get $100 million opening weekend in Hollywood. It's mega successful movie. $100 million, I think, on an opening, Tuesday for a video game is almost a failure anymore.
It depends on the game. Well, it depends on the game, but overall, the video game industry crushes Hollywood right now, and Hollywood knows that. That's why you see Hollywood getting involved in video game development. That's why you see actors getting involved in video game development. actors, I think, are a little bit scared just because the technology and the visuals that can be produced with CG, with computer generated these days, it's getting close to where you could literally have virtual insert actor name here do whatever. I mean, it's pretty amazing as far as the overall visuals that are capable, or that.
Well, I can't remember what movie it was, but a few years back, and we might even be talking 10 years back, there was a movie that actually went out and bought 3 or 4 real Ferraris and crashed and totaled them during the filming of the movie because that was cheaper than actually doing the CG. I mean, you can do it spectacularly and do it so much safer for the stunt people in that. But I think there's also that there's a cost factor there, and I'm assuming CG's come down a little bit.
It's converging. Yeah, it's totally converging. Like the cost to digitize these days. And the other side of it is all of these really high-end video game producers, they already have probably 99.999 however many percentage points you want to carry that 9 out to, of all of the vehicles that you would ever want in a film already modeled at a exceedingly high level, like absolutely gorgeous models. So you just go to these studios and go, I need a Koenigsegg, or I need a 67 Shelby GT350. I need a Pierce Arrow. And it's there. It's already done. And then you can do crazy things with it. Like you could take some of Derek's, Brass Era stuff. You could take some of Will's, insanely, unbelievably gorgeous hot rods and digitize them and do whatever you want to do with them. And then you don't have to worry about destroying this beautiful piece of art. I think that is the other side of the digitization that we're seeing in Hollywood and the video game industry is no one wants to go out and crash a 250 GT. No one wants to go out.
I'm not even going to have a job in the near future. We're just going to.
No, you're totally. No, you're
going to build them on the computer and have virtual car shows.
You're going to build the cars that people want to drive on their computer. Seriously, and I've actually. Yeah. I just got into that. I just downloaded it's Forza Horizon 4 from a studio called Turn 10. They're a Microsoft studio, and Horizon 4 is gorgeous. And the car count is insane. And they've got hot rods and they've got vans and they just you name it. It's in Horizon 4. And there are people that are paying money. Like you build your car, Will, or Derek pulls a car out of the Corvette Museum and a studio comes down and they scan it and they laser scan every single part of it. They put it into whatever game they're putting it into. And then people actually buy that car because they're never going to be able to afford to put it in their garage, but they still want to experience it.
And on the flip side of that, Will builds his, the Green Machine, the Dart he built many years ago. And now not necessarily him, but the owner of that car could license it to the video game and get a couple of bucks for it.
Totally.
Or Derek on the Corvette Museum side.
You want to see something funny on that Forenza or whatever you was talking about? Forza. Somebody's already built the Rocket Camaro.
Yeah. Yeah.
How crazy is that, right?
It's totally crazy.
Yeah. That was actually Sean.
It might have been.
But no, it's actually, it's kind of funny. I mean, we're talking about how much of an impact, what's going on right now in the world is having on this. But, all the way back in 2010, 2011, just before I left the Henry Ford Museum, Sony actually sent out one of their 3D scanning groups and scanned the Type 38 Lotus, the Jim Clark car from the 1965 Indianapolis 500 win. And because they were putting it into one of their racing games. I can't remember. It might have been, it probably was Gran Turismo. They just took, a car that was in a museum collection, a significant car, with, great history and put it in the game, but then, now come up basically 10 years and, we have on loan from General Motors at the Corvette Museum. It's actually going into our new performance gallery to talk almost exactly about what we're talking about tonight in our new exhibit. We have the Gran Turismo 6 Corvette that Corvette actually, the designers actually designed it, built it in the design studio, took it to SEMA, unveiled it with Sony at SEMA, to be the next Corvette in Gran Turismo 6.
The Vision Gran Turismo car. Like is it the crazy wide body like Vision of the future car, or is it an actual like C7 or C6?
No, it's an actual C7 just vamped up for the game.
Okay.
It's a matte blue finish with the yellow tinted headlights.
Okay.
Will, you might have even seen it at SEMA back when they built it. I don't remember right now offhand. I don't remember what year it is.
Yeah, I remember that car.
Yeah, the really matte blue finish, lowered. It's got a kind of a deep brown interior, leather interior, yellow tinted lights. I mean, it's a sweet looking car, but and we're going to use it to talk exactly about, like I say, what we're talking about tonight, the influence of gaming in the performance racing world. And, but it's kind of cool. 10 years ago, they took a historic car that, was already built, already in a museum collection, so on and so forth, and scanned it. But, now, I mean, it's getting so significant that someone like Chevrolet with a Corvette actually partners with Sony and designs and builds a custom built Corvette to specifically go into the game. And that's all it was for. It wasn't like it was a street package. It wasn't anything. It was, we're going to design this cool car, unveil it at SEMA, and it's the next Gran Turismo Corvette.
I'm actually scrolling through pictures of it. I've got it up on our feed right now. If we do show this live, the car that Derek's talking about, you can see on our video right now. I'm looking at it I've seen this before. It's amazing what you can do with current level tech is pretty astounding. And there are manufacturers now that are literally using video games to premiere new models. And that's been happening for a while. And there are actually TV spots out there that most folks would never know, but they're shot with Gran Turismo or Forza. They're rendered. It's not true in-game footage, but manufacturers will take these console games and shoot video of them driving wherever and then render them out and put them into like Sony Vegas or whatever they're using for their editing software and create international commercial spots using video games. It's that real now. It's pretty amazing. And like with what Derek has at the museum, I'm surprised no one has ever come to the museum, and maybe they have and we just haven't seen it, but I'm surprised there isn't a Corvette racing. Like an actual Corvette racing experience that's nothing but Corvette and a software package. It's and now that we're saying this, if there's anyone out there that would like to do that, I still have a software development team that I can call up. It's the sky's the limit. And Will, with the hot rods, man, I mean, I just downloaded a piece of software 2 days ago and I'm playing with it for the first time. And it has an unbelievable drag race component in it. Fun. Take your hot rods, line them up side by side, make some passes. The whole world can then experience what you guys are building at the shop. And it's a way to get people into the car hobby, especially the younger generations. It's a way to get them interested in cars that we might not be taking full advantage of yet.
Well, that's something we've talked about in some previous episodes on. I've brought up that some of the manufacturers, Porsche, for instance, I think it might have been with the 991, not the 992, unveiled like the 991 Turbo at CES rather than the LA Auto Show or Geneva or anything. They're taking advantage of these electronics forums. Now, granted, that's where a lot of the money is. I'll give them that. And,
that was the GT2 RS. Yeah.
And they're taking advantage of that. And before you came on the show, Sean, many months ago, Will, Derek, and I talked about our kids into cars. And we kind of felt that what's happened is, yes, kids are as much into cars as you and I and Will and Derek are, except they do it differently. They play with
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, they build them online, and they come up with their fantasy cars that way, and they live their they kind of live their lives in this virtual world. Now, granted, does it help them when they become 16 or 18 and get their license and start driving? Well, yes, because what do? They play with the computers on the cars, and that's really the only thing left. I mean, Will tell you, I'm sure, yeah, you can modify whatever to do whatever, but I think some of the cheapest, easiest horsepower is just remapping software. And that's really the difference between some of the models of cars. You buy the base level or you buy the next level. It's not the car changed or the motor changed. The software programming changed. Do you have input on that, Will?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can gain a lot of horsepower just by plugging a laptop in a car and changing it up.
Well, was it the Rocket Racing Camaro or something else? I remember, one of your guys you specifically hired at the shop. I don't know if he's still with you, but you specifically hired him because of his knowledge of the electronics, and I can't remember what fuel injection system or whatever. And you spend a bunch of money every year to send some of your crew, and I think this year you went on that trip to learn some of this computer programming.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that guy's not with us anymore, but there's guys out there that, I mean, that's all they do for a living.
They fly all over the world.
Plug a laptop in a car, and whether you do it on the street, whether you do it on a dyno, I mean, we've done it in the driveway of our shop, just launching a car and slow motion video and all sorts of crap, and just changing stuff in the computer. And the Rocket Camaro now, I mean, this car, it's got more freaking sensors on it than the law should allow, and you can go and data log it and go back and read just about everything that you want to read that moves on that car.
You have the shocks and everything censored up on that car, don't you?
Yeah. Awesome. Now, granted, all of it's not completely done and wired and figured out yet, but it's all physically there. The shock travel sensors are mounted. I mean, traction control. I mean, you name it. It's we can data log just about everything we want to data log on that car.
All of the data you're pulling off that car, what I used to do when I owned what our teams used to do when I owned the software companies or co-owned the software companies, we would take the data off of that car and then plug it into a simulation. And literally from the ground up, we would create the actual suspension geometry of the car, the chassis geometry of the car, and then we would go into and set up the motor parameters, your horsepower and torque curves, how the car was behaving at tip-in versus wide-open throttle and partial throttle, and anything that you data logged on that car, we would then plug into the sim, and I could basically recreate your car. Like if you wanted to take that car out to Barber or over to Road Atlanta and data log it, then I would plug it into Road Atlanta, and I would get that car to be accurate within about 2% of the real-world car. And typically the simulator is going to be a little bit quicker than the real world car, and some of it has to do with just the way that the software works. The other part of the fact that cars are typically a little quicker in the simulator is whoever's driving them isn't fearing death. I mean, that's literally what we found out is you're always going to push just a little bit harder in the sim than you would in real life.
Right.
Just because if you hit a wall, there's no consequences. It's escape button, new car, try it again.
But
it's amazing what you can do these days.
You can take, obviously a new LT5, you're not going to go in there and change a bunch of crap and gain a lot because it's pretty well on the, it's on the edge anyway, or close to the edge. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can go in there and increase some stuff and get more power out of it, but nowhere near like what you could see increase in a stock LS1, or a 5.3, or a 6.2,
or
like
anything with boost.
Right. Like my wife's Yukon has the 6.2 in it. We could, free up the exhaust a little bit, put a cold air intake on it, and you're gaining considerable amount of horsepower just by going in and changing some parameters in the ECM.
Timing, air, fuel.
Oh yeah. And even
injector pulse.
Even in the trans, you can mess around with the transmission so much now to gain. It's not necessarily horsepower you're gaining, obviously, but if you're going, quarter mile times is what you want. You can pick up drastically in quarter mile times just by moving shift points around versus, throttle position to RPM to speed, dictates whatever you want to shift and how you want it to shift. And it's,
what you can do with ECU tuning is nuts, man. I had a 2014 Mustang GT.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And shut up.
He didn't crash it either.
I didn't crash it. I never hit anyone. I never hit anyone with it.
It never went in a ditch.
It never went in a ditch. It actually made some really impressive passes. And it was a manual transmission car too.
I take it you didn't have it very long.
I had it for a year and a half.
There you go.
I had it for a year and a half.
That's long for Sean.
The only reason I'm bringing that's an eternity for me. The only reason I'm bringing it up is we're talking about ECU tuning, and that car from the factory, it was the 355 gear car, but it was bone stock, and it was running like 1310 at 106 or something like that from the factory. We tuned it. The gentleman that tuned it is actually the guy that was responsible for bringing mass air to the 5-liter and all of the Fords back in the 80s. And Jim is a bad man. I mean, he really knows what he's doing. And most of the ET that we ended up getting out of that car, the car was on, we put GT500 catback exhaust on it. It had the 355 gear. It had a panhard bar to lessen the wheel hop a little bit. Still a tune and a throttle body that was designed to go with that tune. And the best pass I made on it with just that was a 1210 at 116 miles an hour. And that was mainly, it was just getting all of the factory aids, it would hang the throttle really high in between shifts from the factory just to soften the shift, and it would pull timing, and it would do all kinds of crazy stuff in between shifts to lessen the blow on the transmission in the rear end. And that alone was good for 3/4 of a second, basically. And the rest of it was the throttle body and the tune and stuff. But yeah, what you can do with an ECU, even on a naturally aspirated car these days, is pretty crazy. But when you go to like a turbo or a supercharged car, what you can do with ECU tuning is mind-numbing.
Well, I know they had a kit for I'd say my SHO, but I had a 17, and the ECU was locked up a little bit more. But if you had a 15 or a 16, they'd come out of the box with 375 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque or so. And for less than $1,000, I could bump that up to 500 horsepower. And I always made the comparison, and people looked at me like I was nuts. that's a 3.5 liter EcoBoost motor, twin turbocharged, everything. It's the same motor that's in the Ford GT. Now, I know the Ford GT's got a slightly different crank and different rods and pistons, but it's I believe same compression ratio, same basic everything. And they just they made it a little bit stouter so it would last longer with what's the new Ford GT, 650 700 horsepower.
Yeah, it's like 640, I think.
And
no, that's
so I really believe you could run that to that motor. You might not get more than 400 or 500 miles till it blew up because it might not take it.
I don't think the transmission would take it.
You're
more
dealing
transmission than internals, probably.
Well, you're dealing with two completely different transmissions at that point, but it's still basically the same motor, and with some tuning, it's effectively the same thing, and it's all software. It's all zeros and ones, and just got to figure out the game.
Those zeros and ones directly correlate from the real world over to the simulator, and the zeros and ones in the simulator directly correlate to the real world, and that's why you're seeing so many manufacturers. I mean, there isn't a manufacturer on the planet these days that doesn't have a sim version of whatever the new car that they're building is well before that car ever hits the road in real life. And it doesn't have to be a hot rod. I mean, it's literally Corollas, Camrys, Civics, Honda Fits, Hyundais, whatever you're looking at, you can bet that at a factory somewhere there is a simulated version of that car that's been rolling around for God knows how many virtual miles before they ever build the prototype.
Well, I'm going to do
talk about a boring ass job. I want to go drive my simulator all day.
I'd love it. I'm that geek, man. I just want to drive. I don't care what it is. I don't care whether it's zeros and ones or out in the real world. I just give me a steering wheel.
Now, I'm swing this all the way around to no driving glove style, and unfortunately, this was part of the conversation we had before we started recording, and it was about fabricators. And I was just involved in a conversation on one of my Facebook groups. I can't remember if it was my fiberglass group or our custom coachwork body group or whatever group I was on. And they're talking about wooden bucks and making wooden bucks and, either making a fiberglass body over a wooden buck or making, hammering aluminum over a wooden buck the way they, did it old school wise. And then all of a sudden the comment came up that you can basically go on Google and look up damn near every car, and I'll say interesting car. I don't know if you can actually find it for a Tercel, but you can find a CAD model or a vectorized model of a car with all the dimensions, and then you run it through a slicing software, and you can build that buck. And then, or you reverse that, and you can, if you have a big enough CNC, you can machine that car, or, by removing material as opposed to adding material, and build that car virtually. And I do it with my 3D printing. A lot of times I can find vector models online, and granted, I'm not building full-size cars. I don't have that big of a 3D printer, but I pull things offline, and I can 3D print them and you just scale the model to whatever size printer you have or whatever you need. It's a very interesting world, these zeros and ones, and I don't know how this.
I'm about to share another screen.
Well, what good does that do the guy that had to call in tonight because his internet sucks?
It allows you to recreate all of the Corvettes that you need to recreate.
Yeah, but I can't see the screen, so come on, man.
Oh, well, if we actually show the video for this, then listeners can see the screen.
Oh.
But I mean, this is
literally going back to what John said, though. I mean, it's interesting because you talk about the 3D printing, and I mean, you get into a whole world of, I mean, if you have a big enough 3D printer, I mean, you're going to be able to print full body parts, and I mean, people could be building basically full car bodies around their simulators. And
they are.
Yeah, and I mean, even at the Corvette Museum, we have an actual C6 Corvette that was turned into a simulator.
Mm-hmm.
The engine came out, everything came out, and it's got all kinds of controls on the suspension. What you're talking about, Sean, all the telemetry, all those ones and zeros are programmed into the computer that controls all of the movement of that car. And it's like you're in a C6 Corvette on the track.
Yep.
And you're sitting in the middle of the museum. And people love it. I mean, people love driving that thing.
Yeah.
And, I'm, with this 3D printing capability and things like that, I can, there's going to be people with full car bodies around their simulators, so they feel like they're in the real car.
Yeah, it's already being done. It's definitely already being done. And then there's a guy and his son. I don't know if have you seen the 3D car printing site? There's a guy and his son that have literally. It's not quite an exact replica of an Aventador, but
the Aventador, yes, I saw that. Yep.
I mean, that's all 3D printed. It's 3D printed panels wrapped in carbon. I've actually interviewed the guy that's responsible for that. It's an amazing project, and that's what's coming. I mean, as in-home 3D printing becomes more and more prevalent, we're definitely going to see more people printing their own panels. And I have a picture up right now in it's a site called TurboSquid that you can go to, and there's thousands of vehicles from every era that you can get on TurboSquid and just buy the CAD model for. And I have a 2016 Aston Martin Vulcan that's up right now, and the whole car is modeled. I mean, it's literally right there, and it's modeled 1-to-1 scale. And you can buy this CAD model. Let's see here. Do they have a price on this one? Most of these models, you can buy this CAD model for $99. Is it Aston Martin certified? No. Is it really close to 1-to-1 scale? Yep. it's done it's the whole car. It's wheels, brakes, suspension, undercarriage, interior, roll cage, door panels, door shells, all of the skin, the roof, the hood, the trunk. It's all of it. And yeah, you'll be able to print that, which is pretty crazy.
Well, we keep saying 3D printing with that, but you can take that same model and reverse it, like I said, and as opposed to additive creation, you can, all of a sudden you can subtract. You can take a big block of foam and create that. And then you would have a mold to pop fiberglass bodies, or you'd have a body that you could pull a mold off of and then, make more and more, and only have to get access to the machine once or twice. I mean, to 3D print a car, you've got to have a massive machine, which is still thousands and thousands, of dollars. But you can actually get some, 4x8, 5x12 CNCs and good solid CNCs for 20, 30 grand. Now, yeah, that's not a drop in the hat, but that's definitely much more affordable than this stuff was 5 years ago, and it's very, very obtainable with a little bit of investment or a little bit of work. I was listening to another podcast this week, like I always do, and they were talking about a 3D printed car that was presented to this host to test drive, and presented to this host to do an article about, and he refused to do it because they wouldn't let him drive it. Well, it's come out that basically they believe that was a proof of concept car. And now they have 3D printed the entire body, chassis of this car, or from this company, of a car that is a drivable, functional thing. There's various websites. You can just Google 3D printed cars, and there are a lot of people 3D printing cars, 3D printing boats, 3D printing just about anything. And if they're not printing the whole thing, they're printing a lot of components on it. I know Fuller just built a motorcycle that he 3D printed the wheels and he 3D printed the exhaust, and there's no way these ever could have been created without 3D printing. And we're seeing that more and more in the custom car world.
And the same models that you're building in real life can be translated to the simulator side of things too.
And
if
again,
you want to tie it into the.
Well, I think we've taken this digital and we've basically, it's still kids in their cars. The kid plugging away tonight coding for something for his 3D printer, he could very well be a car guy, and he could be very, very well design the next cool ass wheel that comes out that's not my constantly bitched about 5-spoke design. But and in reality, that might be the only way to get away from that 5-spoke design is 3D print things, because you can put material where it absolutely needs to be and remove material where it really shouldn't be, and build some super lightweight but immensely strong components. It's just, it's
and
the nature of the cars in the digital world.
Your CAD model goes straight to finite element analysis, and that design is basically completely and totally approved before you ever forge it, before you ever put a big block of billet in a CNC machine and cut it out. But it's literally, it's going to work before you ever physically build it. And it's that part of the tech is just amazing to me.
Well, we're absolutely not on the topic we were going to have discussed tonight, but I hope it's a fairly interesting topic. I'm not sure everybody's input on it. Now, Sean and I enjoy some of this techie stuff.
I mean, Derek and Will you guys they chimed in, and there's relevance in both of their worlds for this stuff, and it's awesome, man.
Well, Will's the one who brought up the topic and started asking you about it, and I finally said to Will, guys, if you don't shut up, I'm just going to start recording, because I knew this would be a 40-minute conversation and really go down a rabbit hole.
I'll make it go a little bit longer and down even more of a rabbit hole, because
we don't 3D print Zambonis.
Hang on.
All right. No.
Hang on. I'm about to prove John wrong.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Oh,
no, I mean,
results.
Oh, so
that says motorcycles.
Where I was going to go with it is, okay, I mean, the 3D printing thing is cool, because especially with some of us that are, that collect the early cars, the antique cars, I mean, when I start, thinking about my Peerless, there might be 7 or 8 of them left known in existence. Same thing with my Overland Model 90 Roadster. I think there's about 7 of those left. Parts are hard to come by. So, this 3D printing, as we all know, and we've already seen done quite a bit, helps us print parts, whether it's, the molds to get those parts recast, or just a part that we can fake on the car using a 3D printed piece. But you start talking about simulators, and it's going to be a way, in my opinion and my thought process, there's going to be a way and an opportunity, especially in the museum world, to allow visitors, especially kids, to experience early cars without them having to actually drive a real one. So one of the ideas that was played around with at Henry Ford Museum, and I should check back with that, with my colleagues there. But one of the things we were played around with, and actually Roush did kind of a prototype of back when I worked there, was a very basic at the time simulator of 999, Henry Ford's race car, with the kind of dual tiller steering setup. And, I mean, no one's ever going to get the chance to drive that car again. But building a simulator that can use all of the information that can be pulled off of the actual car, and build that simulator so it rides the same, it steers the same. Like Sean was saying, yes, you're not going to hear the sound of that engine again, but you have an opportunity to feel. Yeah, you could get close.
We can get
you have an opportunity. Yeah, you have an opportunity. These people are going to have an opportunity to feel something that no one's felt for 70, 80 years. I mean, that's one of the things I love about doing what I do and getting to drive some of the cars I get to drive and have driven in my career is I'm one of the few people that have had the chance to drive some of those significant cars and understand how they feel and operate. But if we start bringing the simulator technology into museums that have some of these antique cars that, wouldn't want to be driven anymore, regular, especially by someone who doesn't know how to drive one, but we can give the feeling of what it was like to drive one of these cars back in the turn of the century. I think that's an opportunity that some people would love to have.
And I've been doing that for 20 years with race cars, Derek. I mean, it's with the current technology that we have available on the simulation side of things, there is literally no brake feel that I can't replicate. There is no steering input and feel from the wheels through whatever the rack or the steering box up through the column into your hands. I can replicate with astounding realism.
So basically just build a simulator that has almost no brakes, very little input in the steering, and you've got an early race car.
I got it. I got it. We can do it. And what you're saying there, Derek, is amazing, because years ago, we were involved with a couple projects that were creating living, breathing 3D worlds. And it was basically you joined as an avatar, I joined as an avatar. We had the same conversation we're having now inside a 3D environment. We took that environment to the Smithsonian, and we're talking to them about actually digitizing an entire museum and allowing people to walk through it. You've just taken that idea a step or three further with being able to replicate vehicles through simulation, 3D technology, simulation technology, and allowing people to experience what was on the road back in the early 1900s, what people were racing in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And who do you know that we can make some phone calls to? I'm totally.
Oh, I know a lot
jazzed.
of people.
Yeah, let's make those phone. I'm totally jazzed about that idea and being able to preserve that. And I know you know a lot of people. I know everybody on this in this conversation right now. We all know a lot of people, and being able to showcase those cars to generations that will never even probably get to see one in person. That's huge. Absolutely huge. And we can preserve that, man. It's the technology is definitely there to do it, and it's exciting. And just so you know, I have an actual 3D model of a Zamboni 525 ice machine showing on the desktop right now. I know you can't see it because
sucks to be you, John.
Well, the nice thing about seeing the Zamboni 3D print is I'll take it because I don't have to look at Sean and Will now. So.
Oh, there you go. Well, see, and that's one of the reasons I called in tonight, guys, is I just, I didn't want you guys to just be staring at my, just good looks and being so jealous.
Well, I figured it was your way of embracing the show about digital conversation by going as analog as you almost can go these days.
Well, I didn't call in on the rotary, but,
Something tells me you might actually still have one of those. But
I wonder if I don't think that would work because there's no tone. So how would you make that work with Zoom? I wonder if I could use my voice to make the beeps of the tone. Speaking of rabbit holes.
Yeah. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. We're over the 60-minute mark. I know everybody here's got work to do still. Amazing as we're still doing this podcast, and all of us are still fortunate enough to be working, whether or not we're making income, but we're working. So I'm just going to say goodnight, guys, unless somebody throws something out there during their goodbye.
Hang on. Hang on 1 sec.
Time's up.
All right, Will. I'm not Will. I'm sorry, Derek. Say your word that we close the show with. Did he leave?
I don't.
Zamboni.
There it is. I'd put the picture back up just for you.
And his phone broke up in the middle of it. Even his phone.
That's because you were talking. It wasn't because I broke up. It's because you talked over me. You can't wait 2 seconds. You know, if you rode more Zambonis, you'd understand a slower pace of life. Okay.
Oh my God.
Like I said last week, that is a very slippery slope you are addressing there. But
oh my.
I hope it's not a slope. It's supposed to be perfectly flat.
I'm out of here, guys. Good night.
Adios.